He kicked her out on a dark highway with no money and no phone. But what she found in the rain that night will haunt you forever. The door slammed before I could breathe. Cold air slapped my face as the car sped away. Gravel crunched under my shoes, sharp and wet from the rain. The tail lights blurred into the dark highway, fading like the last bit of safety I had. I stood there, the wind cutting through my jacket. My hands trembled, empty. No phone. No wallet. Only the echo of his voice. Low, cruel, final. Do whatever you want. The word stung like a dare. The night hummed with distant engines and the whisper of trees. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled. A neon gas station sign flickered far down the road, half lit, half dead. I started walking toward it. Each step felt heavier, slower. The smell of wet asphalt filled the air, thick with gasoline and loneliness. My shoes soaked through. I could feel the cold biting my toes. Then I saw her, a woman standing by the edge of the road, near the sign. Her hair was white blonde, tangled, glowing in the dim light. She wore a red coat, too bright for this kind of night. She smiled when our eyes met. "Too soon. To come. You look lost," she said. Her voice was warm, but something in it made my stomach twist. She stepped closer. Her shoes made no sound. I wanted to speak, but my throat closed up. The rain slowed. The world around us went quiet, too quiet. The woman tilted her head, still smiling. And then she said something that made the air freeze around me. Her voice dropped low, smooth like silk but colder than the rain. "I have seen you before," she said. My chest tightened. Her eyes, gray, almost silver, did not blink. They looked through me, not at me. I took a small step back. The gravel shifted under my heel. "How could you have seen me?" I asked, my voice barely holding steady. She smiled wider. "Because I was you once." My heart stumbled in my chest. I felt a rush of heat crawl up my neck. The gas station lights flickered, buzzing louder now, almost like they were warning me. The world around us smelled like wet dirt and rusted metal. The woman's red coat gleamed under the dim light, as if it were alive. "I know what he said," she continued. "I know how it felt when he left you with nothing. The fear, the shame, the anger that burns behind your teeth." I could not breathe. Tears blurred my vision, mixing with the rain. Her words cut too close, too deep. "Who are you?" I whispered. "Someone who stopped waiting for someone to come back," she said. "And started walking." She reached out her hand. Her fingers were pale, delicate, trembling slightly, like she had been standing in the cold too long. Lightning flashed in the distance, lighting up the world in blue for a heartbeat. In that flash I saw something behind her. Car wreck. Twisted metal. A fire long dead but still smoking in the air. I stumbled backward, my breath catching in my throat. She watched me, still calm, still unblinking. "That night," she said softly. "He left me right here too." My voice cracked. "What happened to you?" She smiled again, smaller now. "I walked away from the road. Into the woods. And I never came back." The wind picked up, carrying the smell of pine and rain. Leaves rustled behind me, though the trees stood still. My heart pounded so loud I could hear it echo in my ears. The woman's coat flared as the wind twisted around her. "You do not have to go where I went," she said. "But if you want to live, really live, you must keep walking. Not for him. Not for anyone. For yourself." Her figure started to fade, the red of her coat melting into the mist. I blinked once, and she was gone. I stood there shaking, staring at the empty road. Cars passed far off in the distance, their headlights slicing through the dark. The gas station lights flickered once more, steady this time, almost guiding me forward. I wiped the rain from my face, though it no longer mattered. I took one long breath, deep and steady. Then I began to walk. Each step forward felt like a heartbeat, a pulse of something waking up inside me. For the first time in years, the fear did not feel bigger than me. And somewhere deep down, beneath the storm and the noise, I realized I was not lost anymore. The rain slowed to a drizzle as I walked toward the gas station. My clothes clung to my skin, heavy and cold, but my steps were steady now. The road glistened under the streetlights, stretching endlessly ahead like a silver ribbon. Every sound, the hiss of passing tires, the hum of faraway engines, felt sharper, alive. When I pushed open the gas station door, a bell jingled overhead. Warm air brushed against my face. The smell of coffee, gasoline, and old newspapers filled the air. Behind the counter stood a man with kind eyes, maybe in his late 50s, wearing a faded baseball cap. He looked up from a magazine. "You all right, miss?" His voice was gentle, cautious, the kind that comes from someone who has seen pain before. I nodded, though my voice trembled. "I just need a minute." He poured a cup of coffee without asking. "On the house," he said, sliding it toward me. The steam curled upward, warm and alive, and for a moment I felt something like safety. As I wrapped my hands around the cup, I noticed a photo on the counter. It was old and sun-faded. A young woman stood beside a car, red coat, silver hair. My breath caught. The same woman. I looked up at him. "Who is she?" He followed my gaze, his eyes softening. "That was my sister," he said quietly. "She went missing 20 years ago. Right on this road." The sound of the clock ticking filled the silence between us. I felt the world tilt slightly, as if the air itself had turned heavier. "She helped me," I whispered. He frowned. "You saw her." My hand shook around the coffee cup. "I do not know what I saw," I said, my throat tight. "But she told me to keep walking." He stared for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "She always tried to help people, even when she could not help herself." A single tear slid down my cheek before I even felt it coming. I wiped it away quickly, but he noticed. He came around the counter, his footsteps slow and sure. "Listen," he said, placing a hand on my shoulder. "You may have been left with nothing tonight. But that is not the same as being alone." The kindness in his voice broke something open inside me. I had spent years pretending to be strong, holding my breath in a marriage that smothered me. And now, standing in a gas station at midnight, soaked to the bone, I finally let myself exhale. "I do not even know where to go," I said. He nodded. "There's a bus stop 2 miles down. It runs through the city by sunrise. You can get a new start there." I hesitated. A new start. The words felt foreign, almost unreal. Could I really start over? As I stepped toward the door, he called after me. "Hey," he said, holding something out. A small silver locket. It was hers. "I think she would want you to have it." I took it gently. When I opened it, inside was a faded photo. The same woman, smiling wide, holding hands with a little girl. The girl's eyes looked just like mine. My heart thudded, slow and heavy. I closed the locket and slipped it around my neck. Outside, the rain had stopped completely. The clouds broke open just enough for a sliver of moonlight to spill across the road. I started walking again, one step at a time, the gravel crunching softly beneath me. The locket was warm against my skin. For the first time that night, I was not afraid of the dark. Because somewhere deep inside, I felt her still walking beside me. The woman who was once me. And as the road stretched ahead, endless and open, I knew I would never let anyone decide my direction again. The moon followed me as I walked, pale and silent above the black ribbon of highway. Each step carried the rhythm of something new. Something I had forgotten could exist. Freedom, fear, hope, raw and trembling but alive. By the time I reached the bus stop, dawn was bleeding into the sky. The horizon glowed faintly pink, the kind of color you only notice when you have been awake all night with too much to remember. A single bench waited beneath the flickering streetlight. I sat, clutching the silver locket against my chest. The morning air smelled of wet earth and diesel. Somewhere a bird sang. It was the first beautiful sound I had heard in years. When the bus finally arrived, the driver looked at me through the open door. "You heading somewhere special?" he asked. I hesitated. Then I smiled just a little. "Not yet," I said. "But I will." He nodded and motioned me inside. The seats were cracked and smelled of old vinyl, but it felt like sanctuary. As the bus pulled away, I watched the road disappear behind me, swallowed by the fog. The city appeared hours later, a maze of glass, motion, and noise. Tall buildings reached for the sky like they were begging for sunlight. People rushed in every direction, coffee cups in hand, eyes on screens. And there I was, standing in the middle of it all with nothing but a backpack that was not mine and a locket that somehow was. I found a diner near the corner of 5th and Maple. The sign buzzed softly. Open 24 hours. Inside, the smell of bacon and fresh coffee hit me like warmth I did not know I needed. The waitress, her name tag said Becky, smiled when she saw me. "You look like you need breakfast more than anyone in this town," she said. Her kindness made my throat ache. I nodded and sat by the window. The coffee burned my tongue, but I did not care. Tasted like a beginning. Days turned into weeks. I found a job cleaning rooms at a motel downtown. The pay was small, but the people were kind, and no one asked questions I could not answer. At night, I wrote in an old notebook left behind in one of the rooms. I wrote everything: the road, the woman, the locket, the man at the gas station. Every word felt like I was reclaiming a piece of myself. One afternoon, I was folding sheets when I saw a familiar face on the news. The TV flickered in the corner of the lobby. It was my husband. He was being led into a police car. The headline read, "Local businessman arrested in fraud investigation." My knees went weak. The world spun for a second. But then relief. Deep shaking relief. He was no longer the man with the power to break me. He was just another face behind flashing lights. I touched the locket again. For the first time it felt light. I whispered to myself, "You were right." The words slipped out before I could stop them. Maybe they were for the woman in red. Maybe they were for me. That night I walked down to the pier. The city lights shimmered on the water, gold and soft. I leaned against the railing, breathing in the salt air. Behind me, life carried on. Horns honking, laughter spilling from bars, a baby crying somewhere down the street. But in that noise I found peace. I took off the locket and held it up to the moonlight. Her face smiled back, faint but still there. I kissed it gently and whispered, "Thank you for showing me the way." Then I opened my hand. The chain slipped through my fingers, falling into the dark water below. It disappeared without a sound. I did not feel loss. Felt release. Because now, the woman who once stood in the rain, shaking and small, was gone. And in her place stood someone new. Someone who walked her own road. Someone who was finally truly free. Years passed. Seasons turned, cities changed, but I stayed. I built a quiet life in that same town by the water. The kind of life that does not ask for attention but still feels like home. I worked mornings at the diner, the same one Becky had welcomed me into years ago. She became the sister I never had. We shared stories over burnt coffee and the steady rhythm of pouring rain against the glass. People came and went. Truck drivers, lonely travelers, women with eyes full of secrets. Sometimes I saw myself in them. Sometimes I saw who I used to be. I rented a small apartment above a bakery. It smelled like cinnamon every morning, and at night I could hear the ocean humming like a lullaby. The sound no longer made me feel small. It made me feel alive. Every now and then, when I walked home after my shift, I would pass a red car parked under the streetlight. It always made my heart skip. But it was never him. He was gone for good. Still, the past has a strange way of finding you when you finally start to breathe. One Sunday afternoon, I was sweeping the floor near the diner counter when a young woman came in. Her hair was pale, her coat bright red. For a moment my breath stopped. She looked around the diner like she was lost, eyes darting to the window, the clock, the exit. "Are you all right?" I asked gently. She nodded, though tears shimmered at the edge of her lashes. "My boyfriend left me," she said softly. "On the highway." Something inside me cracked open. The room tilted, not with fear, but recognition. I pulled out a stool for her, poured her a cup of coffee, and sat beside her. "Do you know what he said to me?" she whispered. He told me to do whatever I wanted. My hands froze. The words echoed through the years like a ghost. I looked at her, young, trembling, desperate for something solid to hold on to. And for the first time, I understood why the woman in red had appeared to me. Because pain passes down like a message until someone decides to break it. I reached across the counter and took her hand. "Then that is exactly what you should do," I said. "But start by doing what is best for you." She looked at me, confused but listening. I could see the storm in her eyes, the same storm I had once walked through. I smiled softly. "There is a bus station 2 miles down. It will take you somewhere new. And when you go, do not look back. Not even once." She nodded slowly, tears spilling over. Before she left, she hugged me, tightly like she already knew me somehow. And as the door closed behind her, the bell jingled again. The sound was light, peaceful, final. I turned toward the window, where the ocean glimmered in the distance. For the first time I saw sunlight breaking through the clouds. The light hit the counter, warm and golden, and in that glow I felt her presence. The woman in red. Not haunting me this time, but standing beside me in spirit. I whispered quietly, "It ends with me." The bell above the door rang again as Becky returned from the back. She smiled at me, unaware of what had just shifted inside the walls of that small diner. And maybe she did not need to know. Because for the first time I was not defined by what I had lost, but by what I had found. Strength. And the power to help another woman find her way out of the dark. Outside, the world kept moving. Cars passing, seagulls calling, life humming steady. And as I wiped down the counter, I realized something I never thought I would feel again. I was proud. Not of the pain I endured, but of the woman who refused to stay broken. The woman who kept walking long after everyone else stopped watching. And in that small diner by the sea, with the smell of coffee and salt in the air, I knew this was my home. Because I had built it from everything that once tried to destroy me. It was a quiet Tuesday morning when the letter came. The mail usually sat untouched on the diner counter until closing time, but this envelope felt different. The paper was cream-colored, the handwriting elegant but shaky, like someone who had not written in a long time. No return address, just my name. For a long moment I stared at it. My hands trembled as I slid my finger under the seal. The paper inside smelled faintly of smoke and rain. The first line stopped my breath. "I owe you an apology." It was his handwriting. The man who once left me on that cold, dark road. The man I had built a new life to forget. I read every word slowly, my eyes burning with the weight of memories. He wrote that prison had changed him. That time had taken his arrogance and left him with silence. He said he had replayed that night 1,000 times, wondering why he had chosen cruelty over mercy. "I do not expect forgiveness," he wrote, "but I hope you found a life better than the one I gave you." My heart ached in a way I had not felt in years. Not because I missed him, but because the ghost of who I used to be finally felt seen. I folded the letter carefully and set it down beside my coffee cup. Outside, the sky was painted in soft blues and golds. I could hear the waves breaking against the shore beyond the window. The same sound that used to remind me of loneliness now felt like a heartbeat. Steady, alive, endless. Becky walked by and noticed the paper in my hand. "Everything all right?" she asked. I smiled faintly. "Yes," I said. "Better than all right." That night, I took the letter with me to the pier. The same place where I had once let go of the locket. The water shimmered under the moonlight, calm and endless. I read his words one more time, then tore the letter gently down the middle. The pieces fluttered into the air, catching the wind like tiny white wings before falling into the dark water. I whispered, "I forgive you." Not for him but for me. Because carrying that hate had kept a small corner of my heart chained to the past. And I was done being tied to the version of myself that only knew how to survive. A soft breeze brushed my hair, almost like a touch. And for a moment I could swear I saw her again, the woman in red, standing across the pier. She smiled, proud, peaceful. Then she turned and faded into the night sky. I walked home with tears in my eyes, but they were not heavy. They were clean, new, like the kind that come after a storm. When I reached my apartment, I sat by the window and watched the sunrise spill over the rooftops. The light hit my face, warm and forgiving. In the reflection, I saw a woman I finally recognized. Not broken, not lost, just whole. I whispered to the morning, "This is what freedom feels like." And somewhere miles away, a woman in a red coat finally rested in peace. Because her story had found its ending through mine. 10 years past. The seasons carved their rhythm into the small coastal town. Waves, wind, and the quiet hum of time. The diner still stood on the corner of 5th and Maple, its neon sign flickering in the evening fog. And I was still there, though everything about me had changed. My hair had grown streaks of silver. My hands carried lines that told stories no one else could read. But my heart had learned to beat softly again without fear. Life had settled into something peaceful. The kind of peace that does not shout but hums quietly beneath every sunrise. I had friends, laughter, a garden on the balcony that smelled of rosemary and hope. I had built a life that no longer trembled. Until one rainy afternoon, when a man walked into the diner. He looked lost in the same way I once had. Damp from the storm, eyes tired, clutching a worn duffel bag. Becky, still sharp as ever, nudged me. "Looks like someone's had a day," she whispered. I smiled and poured him a coffee. "Rough weather out there," I said. He looked up at me, and something inside me stilled. His eyes were familiar. Not in a way that made me afraid. In a way that made my chest ache. He spoke softly. "My mother used to work here." And blinked. "Oh, what was her name?" He smiled faintly. "She never told me much, but she used to talk about a woman who helped her once. Said she changed her life." He looked down at the steaming cup in his hands. "She always wore a red coat." My breath caught. The world seemed to slow around me. The sound of rain on the windows faded, replaced by the thrum of my heartbeat. He continued. "She was young back then. Said she met a stranger on the highway who gave her hope. Told her to take a bus, start over." His voice cracked slightly. "That woman saved her. Saved me too, I guess. Because without her, my mom never would have become who she was." I felt tears gather behind my eyes, blurring the edges of the room. I pressed a hand to my chest. The past, the pain, the endless road, it had all led here. "What was your mother's name?" I asked. He hesitated, smiling through the tiredness. "Her name was Grace." Covered my mouth. Grace, the girl in the red coat. The girl I had once helped in this very diner. The one who reminded me of myself all those years ago. He reached into his bag and pulled out a small envelope. "She passed last spring," he said softly. "But before she did, she made me promise to find you. She said you'd understand." My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside was a note written in careful, looping handwriting. "You once told me not to look back. But I looked for you anyway. Because you were the first person who showed me that kindness is a kind of freedom. Thank you for helping me believe in life again." I pressed the letter to my heart. Tears fell freely now, but they were warm, full of love instead of grief. When I looked up, the young man was smiling gently. "She wanted me to tell you something," he said. She said, "Tell her the road was worth it." Outside, the rain had stopped. Sunlight broke through the clouds, spilling across the diner floor like liquid gold. I looked out the window and for a moment I saw her again. Grace, standing by the water in her red coat, hair glinting in the light. She turned toward me and smiled before fading into the horizon. I closed my eyes, whispering, "Yes, Grace. The road was worth it." The young man stood to leave, but I stopped him. "Wait," I said softly. "You do not have to rush. Stay for dinner." He nodded, smiling. And as he sat down across from me, the diner filled with the soft murmur of voices, the clinking of cups, the hum of a jukebox playing an old country song. For the first time in my life, I felt the world come full circle. Pain had turned into purpose. Loss had grown into love. And in that small American diner by the sea, under flickering neon and the smell of coffee and rain, two strangers shared a meal, bound by the quiet miracle of compassion that had begun on a lonely road so many years ago. Because sometimes the most beautiful stories are not about how we fall apart, but how, somehow against all odds, we find our way back home. The diner lights glowed soft and amber that evening, painting everything in a warmth that felt almost sacred. Outside, the sky had turned the color of honey melting into gray, and the ocean whispered against the shore like it was telling old secrets. The young man, Grace's son, sat across from me, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee he had barely touched. There was something gentle in the way he spoke, something that reminded me of his mother. He had her eyes. That same steady light that saw the world not for what it was, but for what it could still become. He told me about her life. How she had built a small flower shop in Portland. How she would wake before dawn to drive to the market, filling her truck with tulips and daisies even in the middle of winter. How she would hum while she worked, a quiet tune that made the customers linger. She was happy, he said softly, his voice trembling with pride and sorrow. She used to tell me, there is no such thing as being too late to start over. My throat tightened. Those were my words, spoken long ago to a frightened girl in a diner, on a night that had nearly broken both of us. And now, hearing them come back to me, carried across years and generations, felt like a gift from something bigger than time itself. I reached across the table, placing my hand over his. She was brave, I said. And so are you. He looked down, blinking hard. She always wanted to find you, he whispered. She said you were the reason she believed good people still existed. I felt a tear slip free, tracing the lines on my cheek like it had a map to follow. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The diner hummed softly with the clatter of dishes, the scent of coffee, and the faint music of the jukebox playing "Take It Easy" by the Eagles. When he finally stood to leave, he hesitated at the door. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Anything," I replied. He smiled faintly. "Do you believe people meet for a reason?" I looked out at the fading horizon, where the sun was melting into the sea, and the world felt wide and kind again. "I do," I said. "I believe some people are placed in our path to remind us who we are, and who we can still be." He nodded slowly, as if tucking the words into his heart. Then he left, the bell above the door jingling softly behind him. I stood there for a while, watching the light fade from gold to silver. Outside, the first stars blinked awake in the dark sky. And for the first time in a long time I felt surrounded, not by loneliness but by connection. Invisible threads, stretching across years, roads, and broken nights, binding one soul to another. I wiped the counter clean, the same way I had done 1,000 times before. But tonight it felt different. It felt like closing a chapter that had waited patiently for its ending. Later, as I walked home, the town was quiet. The scent of the ocean mixed with the faint sweetness of blooming jasmine. Every window I passed glowed warm, full of life and laughter, and I thought, this is what healing looks like. Not fireworks, not grand speeches, just small, ordinary moments that whisper you made it. When I reached my apartment, I lit a candle by the window and sat down with my notebook, the same one I had written in all those years ago. The pages were worn, yellowed, soft from being read too many times. I opened to the very last blank page and began to write. To the woman in red, wherever you are. I carried your strength until I could build my own. And tonight I gave it away again to someone who needed it more. This is what you taught me. That love is not a chain. It is a hand reaching through the dark. I closed the notebook, tears falling freely now, but they were not sad. They were full. Outside, the candle flickered, its flame reflected in the glass like a heartbeat. The wind rustled softly through the streets, carrying the sound of waves and the faint laughter of strangers heading home. I leaned back in my chair and whispered to the night, I am home too. And somewhere beyond the horizon, past memory and time, a woman in a red coat smiled beneath the stars. Her story finally at rest. her kindness still alive, rippling forever through the quiet hearts of those she saved. Because that is what America really is, I thought. Not just highways and small towns. Not just pain and rebirth. But the unspoken promise that no matter how far you fall, someone somewhere will help you stand again. And under that endless sky, I finally understood. The road that began with heartbreak had not led me away from myself. It had brought me home. The years that followed unfolded gently, like pages turning in a book I had once been too afraid to read. The diner became more than a job. It became a home for wanderers, for the broken, for those who needed a place to stop and breathe. People still came in from the rain, dripping and lost, the way I once did. And every time I poured them a cup of coffee, sat across the counter and listened. Not as someone who pitied them but as someone who understood. I grew older in that diner. The town changed around me. New shops, new faces, the same ocean humming in the distance. But kindness never went out of style. It lingered like the smell of fresh pie cooling on the windowsill. Sometimes I would walk to the pier at sunset, when the water shimmered gold and the world felt quiet enough to hear your own heartbeat. I would close my eyes and remember the night I was left on that cold, wet road. The fear, the loneliness, and the moment a stranger's courage became the spark that saved me. I realized then that life had come full circle. Pain had been the beginning, but peace became the ending. And all of it, every heartbreak, every storm, every tear had led me here. To this small corner of the world where hope still walked through the door. Sometimes wearing a red coat, sometimes carrying nothing at all. On my last evening in the diner, I turned the sign to closed and wiped the counter one final time. The smell of coffee and sea salt filled the air. Becky hugged me goodbye, her eyes shining with years of friendship that words could never hold. I stepped outside, locking the door behind me. The sky was painted in pink and gold, the kind of sky that makes you stop and thank the universe for letting you live long enough to see it. The wind brushed against my face, soft and familiar, as if whispering, "You did it." I walked down to the pier one last time. The ocean stretched endlessly before me, the same as it always had been. Wild, untamed, honest. I sat at the edge, letting the waves kiss the soles of my shoes. "I made it," I said quietly. "After everything, I made it." And I could almost feel her beside me, the woman in red, smiling, proud, finally at peace. As the sun sank below the horizon, I stood and began to walk home. Step light, steady, free. Because the story that began on a lonely road had not ended in sorrow. It ended in grace, in love, in a life rebuilt from the ashes of pain into something beautiful, something worth remembering. And as the night folded softly over the town, I knew one truth would forever remain. That even when the road is dark and endless, somewhere ahead there will always be light. You just have to keep walking toward it.